so let's get into today's case. If you've ever heard me say in the past that whatever case I was doing was the most shocking, the most crazy, the most outrageous, well, I take it back, okay? This case has brought shocking to a new level. Like, we have reached the top level of the crazy mountain here, okay? In no disrespect, though, there are countless victims here in various different ways, and my heart goes out to all of them. But let's not waste any more time, because there's a lot to tell you. This is the case of David Fuller. Now let me ask you a question that nobody ever asked you before. Who is a worse person? A guy who murdered 2 innocent women? Or a guy who had relations with at least 100 corpses? Which is worse? Okay, well, you knew I was gonna say this, but how about someone who has done both? Okay. Enough said. Now let me start with the unsolved murders of 1987. Well, they have been solved recently. But before I go into the background of David Fuller, I want to make this very easy to follow, okay? So let's start in 1987 in England, in a town called Tunbridge Wells. We have 2 young women. First, we have Wendy Knell, 25 years old, recently divorced, works at a photo shop called Super Snaps, and she lives in what they call a bed sit, and that is basically just an apartment where numerous people just have like a bedroom, and then they all share common area and kitchen and bathroom. Okay. They call it a bed sit. So she lived in a bed sit. And in June of 1987, one morning, her boyfriend found her in bed, naked, dead, strangled, beaten around the head, and raped. They couldn't find the killer. Same year, November, Caroline Pierce, 20 years old, also lived in a bed sit about a mile away from Wendy. They don't know each other. She works at a restaurant called Buster Brown's on the same street as Wendy. And she goes missing in November, and she is found 3 weeks later in a drainage ditch by a farmer. She was murdered in the exact same way as Wendy, and she was place right now as we speak. So they were able to put away some evidence, such as a footprint on one of the girl's blouses that matched a certain type of shoe. There was a bloody fingerprint found on a bag. There was sperm found on Wendy's bed and Caroline's stockings. Okay, so that kind of became cold, but nobody forgot about it. Now let's jump over to David Fuller, born in 1954 in East Essex, England. I don't have a huge amount of information on his childhood, but I can tell you that he trained to become an electrician, and his hobbies were photography, birdwatching, and bicycling. He was known to be kind of a quiet and boring guy in general. Now, in the 70s, he was arrested for what is called creeper burglaries. Now, I had to look that up quite a few times, and I could not find out exactly what he did, no matter how hard I looked, okay? But it seems that a creeper burglary is when a person enters a home while the owner is home, while they are there, creeps around, looks at them, watches them, and takes something. Now, I would assume that if you were a serious burglar and you wanted to steal something very valuable or lots of things, you would do it when no one was home, because you'd be more successful. So this is a certain type of act where I assume the main goal is just to, be a voyeur. Just to, watch the woman sleeping or changing, maybe take some of her clothing or something, I have no concrete description of what he did, but I do know he was charged with 26 of these burglaries. He pleaded guilty to 3 of them and had no jail time. I don't get it. 26 of anything. That's definitely a dangerous person. So if anyone knows anything more about that, please let me know. So that was the 70s, and also in the 70s he married his first wife in 1972, so he was doing these creeper burglaries while he was married to her. They had 2 kids. She cheated, and they broke up. In 1982, he married his second wife. At this point, he started doing quite a bit of cheating on her. He was also said to probably have been beating her because she had a lot of bruises all the time. He started following the band Cutting Crew around the country to take photos. He was the unofficial photographer. I guess that's nothing real, right? And so he was very into that band. interesting to note, they had a hit song, maybe their biggest hit, called Died in Your Arms Tonight. Okay. In 1989, he started working as a hospital electrician. And he worked for a couple of different hospitals over the years. He continued to do that work until the year 2020. But anyway, he did break up with his second wife when ultimately she left him for another man. Then he married his third wife in 1999. And he continued to cheat. He was always cheating, from what they say, often with the nurses. But one of his former lovers said of him that he was always very gentle, very kind. Nothing, she did not think he would ever do anything really violent or kinky or anything. And she had no bad experiences with him. So, anyway, he's just out there living his best life. He has made himself the go-to guy at the hospital morgue. He has groomed the staff there to think he is the greatest, sweetest, smartest, nicest guy. Okay? Alright, now let's jump back to the bed-sit murders, okay, as they were called. DNA became a thing, for solving crimes, and in 1995, they checked all their info against the national database, but sadly, there were no matches. But in 2019, familial DNA became a thing, so you could match your sample to somebody who was probably in the same family as the criminal. You know what I mean? So it just, it made it a little easier to find a person who wasn't in the database personally, So they got a hit. David Fuller's brother was in the database. I don't know for what. So, December 3rd, 2020, they knocked on his door and they told him he was being arrested for these two murders from 1987, and he was obviously shocked. And he said, "It was not me. I don't know those girls. I never heard of them. I'm not familiar with the neighborhood. I've never been to the places where they worked." But they got him because his DNA was confirmed as a match with the sperm, number one. His fingerprint matched the of him engaged in sexual acts with corpses from the hospital morgues between the years 2008 and 2020. Like, what? Oh, and don't forget, that only begins in 2008, maybe because that's when he got, the equipment to save it on hard drives. I don't know, I'm just guessing. But he worked in the hospital since 1989. So, they had to look at all this junk. I can't even imagine how long that took and how vile that was for them. But they were trying to identify the people in the videos and photos. They managed to identify 78 specific individuals. The others they just couldn't recognize. Or there was, no way to figure out who they were. But they're saying, at least 100 different people, of which they identified 78. And then they had to tell all these family members what had happened to their deceased loved ones in the morgue. You see, David had a swipe card, so he had access to, the morgue, amongst other places in the hospital, because he was the electrician. And he would go there after the morgue staff had left and do his business and record it. Sometimes he would come back to the same person numerous times days he was doing that creeping. So I'm thinking kind of like, I'm thinking he had a fetish, of watching women, sneaking in. Maybe he was touching them in their sleep. I don't know. I'm just guessing about all of this. Maybe taking their underwear. Maybe taking photos. Then, I don't know why he didn't get arrested. What in the world? I mean, he was arrested, but why wasn't he jailed? Come on. What is up with that? Makes no sense. No sense. If you did 26 anythings, you need to go to jail. Okay? Because it shows you keep doing it and doing it and doing it. You did it so many times. Who said you're gonna stop? And that is a dangerous person who sneaks into someone's house. So I don't get it. But okay, so that probably progressed to murder at some point, like maybe one of the times when he was creeping, the person woke up, and then he raped and murdered them. Or, something like along those lines. So it was a progression from just creeping and looking to actually, killing them. And that's what we had in 1987. Maybe he got scared after those two, realizing that the police really meant business. And maybe, actually they did say that it looked like one of those victims had been raped after she was dead. So maybe he learned from that he liked necrophilia. I'm sorry if this is too much for you. Click out if that's the case. And then he figured, doing what he did with corpses was a victimless crime and nobody would ever know. But you know what? It is not a victimless crime. Maybe it is if no one finds out. I don't know. That depends on your level of, belief in the afterlife, I suppose. But once the people found out, it is absolutely horrifying to them. I mean, imagine. I'd hate to have this happen to anyone. Imagine your loved one died for whatever reason. Whether it was tragic or old age or, it doesn't matter. It's bad enough when someone you love dies. But then you find out that this creepy man, who was 67 at the time that he was discovered, by the way, or he's 67 now, actually. You find out this creepy man was doing things to their body. That is absolutely horrendous to hear. Horrendous. Especially in the cases where they were children. I mean, come on. So I'm also wondering how he is being accepted at prison. Like, do you think he's getting a really, really hard time with the other prisoners or what? I mean, he is kind of a quietish 67-year-old man with a ton of despicable crimes under his belt that everyone knows about in the area there, I'm sure. And I'm sure all the other prisoners know what he did. I wonder if any of them want to associate with him. If they want to sit with him at meals. Or if they're making his life, a living hell. Tell me what you think.